Tonight, consumers are paying a lot less at the pump after the removal of the federal carbon tax. That story. And
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre makes a stop in this province.
Great to be here in Petty Harbour with our incredible Canada First Conservative team.
I'm Heather Gillis, and I'll have that story coming up on Here and Now.
We did identify incidents and serious issues with potentially residents being harmed and even a death as a result of some errors that appear to have happened.
The Auditor General is voicing concerns over conditions at personal care homes and the province's lack of oversight.
We don't normally get much of a spring, but this year plants are starting to come up early.
Probably the second and third week in April we'll start to see it at this point. So who knows, maybe we'll have some early rhubarb this year.
I'll have more coming up.
This is CBC Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. Well, consumers across the province saw a sharp price decline at the pumps this morning. That's because the federal carbon tax has been removed as of today. The Public Utilities Board made a price adjustment overnight to reflect the change, meaning all types of gasoline decreased by 20.3 cents per litre and diesel dropped by 24.6 cents per litre. Furnace and stove oil were not part of the price adjustment as they were already exempt from the tax. The Liberal government under Justin Trudeau first put the highly debated consumer carbon tax in place in 2019 as a way to incentivize Canadians to transition to greener energy sources. Federal Liberal leader Mark Carney then dropped the tax last month as his first move as Canada's Prime Minister. To politics now. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre made two campaign stops in the province today, promising to support the fishery and oil and gas production. But as Here and Now's Heather Gillis reports, he was met by a small group of protesters at his second stop.
These are all the demands.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre checked this province off his to-do list with two campaign stops in Newfoundland and Labrador Tuesday. First up, Olympic Construction's warehouse in St. John's, where he promised to support the provincial Liberal government's plan to double oil and gas production.
I also will grant rapid permits for LNG Newfoundland Labrador, which will pipe gas from the Jeanne d'Arc oil field to a floating liquefaction facility, which will then be shipped off to Europe to break European dependence on Putin and turn dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people.
In Petty Harbour, a small group of protesters with the LGBTQ group No Space for Hate were waiting, barred from attending this event, here anyway to stand up for marriage equity, gender and trans rights.
We're here protesting Pierre Poilievre because we believe that he is a threat to Canadian democracy and is a risk to all of our rights, especially as to us LGBTQIA+ people.
Meanwhile, on the wharf, Poilievre's second event of the day was tightly controlled, shutting down some reporter questions to Avalon candidate Steve Kent.
There's a picture of you going around on social media wearing a Make America Great hat.
This event isn't open for questions, it's just for coverage, okay?
Staffers also jostled multiple reporters. Meanwhile, Poilievre made announcements on promising to end fishing bans in marine protected areas and push out foreign fishing.
To give back control and quota to our fish harvesters. We will double the permanent funding available for Canada's small craft harbours.
We were promised the first 115,000 metric tons, right?
Jerry Kennedy, who was at the event and supports Conservative candidate Clifford Small, says he wants to see changes in the fishery. He says harvesters can't bear the brunt of U.S. tariffs alone. He's also concerned about cod quotas for the inshore fishery with the end of the moratorium.
We're looking for some support. Support for the fishing industry. There's a lot of work needs to be done in this fishery to get it back on track. Get our cod and get our inshore looked after. We're forgotten about.
Meanwhile, Poilievre also said that he's open to considering changes to Marine Atlantic fees. That's because he says people in this province have a right to get across the country just like anyone else. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, now to some news from the courts. A former St. John's area figure skating coach convicted of sexual violence against 2 teenage figure skaters was sentenced today to 6 years in prison. Here Now's Malone Mullen has the details, but first a warning. This story does contain details of sexual violence and suicide.
He was a winning figure skater and the head coach at an Avalon rink. He's now a convicted child rapist who will remain an inmate in federal prison for the next several years. Matthew Power was found guilty in November of repeated sexual violence against 2 teenage figure skaters, girls he had taught at the local rink. His crime spanned from 2016 to 2020. Both victims were under 16 when he preyed on them, one as young as 13 when he started sending her lewd Snapchat messages. Power appeared by video this morning to hear he'd spend the next 6 years behind bars for those crimes. Justice Valerie Marshall noted they'd had an enduring effect on his victims. One told the court in February that she can't leave the house and still has panic attacks and nightmares. The other victim's mother said her daughter was so distraught she attempted to kill herself, and said the skating community had turned its backs on them after she reported Power to police in 2021. Justice Marshall also noted that Matthew Power seemed to have significant backing despite his crimes, saying she was sent around 30 letters attesting to the former coach's character, notes of support from his friends, colleagues, and members of the skating community. But Marshall also said Power's lack of remorse, repeated evidence of grooming, and his use of Snapchat, which deletes messages once they're opened, didn't help reduce his sentence. The 30-year-old was also banned for 10 years from holding employment where he'd be in a position of trust over minors, and he can't use the internet for a decade after his release unless he refrains from using social media to talk to children under 16. Malone Mullen, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the province's Auditor General is voicing serious concerns about the management of the provincial personal care home program and has issued 10 recommendations to the health department. An audit Denise Hanrahan's office released earlier today outlines disturbing incidents like human feces being smeared on walls, residents going missing, improperly administered medication, and even a death as a result of the errors. According to Hanrahan, the province's health department failed in its responsibility to oversee and enforce operational standards, which haven't been updated since 2007. She also criticized the department for inaction on issues that had already been identified by her predecessor in 2015.
Some of those issues of non-compliance we felt we needed to disclose in this report to that level of detail, because we felt that in some cases they do question whether those are the right people to providing that level of service to such a vulnerable population. So it comes back to those standards for us, and if somebody does not have a clear code of conduct or if somebody has exhibited inappropriate behavior in a workplace, there are other mechanisms that then kick in as well. And for us, we wanted to make sure that we gave the right information to government with respect to that.
Some U.S. tariffs have already been imposed on Canadian goods, and more are expected tomorrow. But tariffs aren't the only roadblock facing businesses in this country. Trade barriers between provinces cost the country billions. But whether those barriers are a bad thing depends on who you ask. Malone Mullen explains.
We've endured weeks of chaotic tariff threats from U.S. President Donald Trump. First they're on, then they're off again, then they're delayed but only for certain products, and the details are changing every day. It's a lot of uncertainty, but one thing that stayed constant here in Canada is talk about interprovincial trade barriers. But what are they? And what would that mean for an island like Newfoundland or a great northern expanse like Labrador?
Canada is huge, and each province and territory has a lot of independence. Healthcare, education, alcohol sales, all run by provincial governments. So when it comes to buying and selling goods to each other, the rules aren't always the same.
Take food production. Provinces have different minimum prices for milk, say, different food inspection regulations, packaging laws, and transportation rules that dictate how much cargo an 18-wheeler can carry on a highway. It all makes sending goods across the country complicated and expensive. This is economist Tony Fang at Memorial University. He says if he were premier, he'd be jumping at this opportunity to cut through the red tape and open up trade within Canada. He says if it's done correctly, there's a lot of money to be made.
Some estimates put that number as high as $200 billion per year across the country. It wouldn't make up for the loss of American consumers, but it would definitely help. Here's the thing, losing all those rules could come at a cost. Doug May, a former economics professor at Memorial University, explains it pretty simply. Removing regulations and rules might mean removing some industry protections.
Like by, say, dairy boards that set prices for milk. Processors in this province have to pay a set number of dollars for milk. Legally speaking, they're not allowed to pay any less. And that's according to a piece of legislation called the Natural Products Marketing Act.
That law exists because of an idea in economics called comparative advantage. In other words, some places are great at making some things and just aren't that good at making others. So compared to somewhere with better weather and grasslands and infrastructure, dairy farmers here might have a tough time competing. Removing the rules that protect them means these industries could collapse. Say we suddenly got an influx of cheap milk from Quebec. Quebec farmers, hypothetically, sell their milk for $1 less than local producers. If government regulations aren't forcing processors and grocers to buy local milk, they're going to reach for the cheaper option.
Farmers here could lose their livelihoods. They might move to find jobs elsewhere and take their spouses with them, people who work in things like healthcare and education. And for a province that's already struggled with unemployment, population decline, and industry decimation, that's a scary thought. Now, if that all sounds pretty extreme, well, it might be. Trade barriers like tariffs provide some protection for industries that might not do so well on a level national playing field. But both Fang and May say that removing some of those trade barriers means that we can focus on the industries that would do well. And luckily, Newfoundland and Labrador has a few of those. Our highest grossing exports are offshore petroleum, minerals, and seafood. Crude oil and iron ore together make up 80% of the total value of all of our exports, and that's about a third of our GDP. Fang points out that not many provinces can compete with those goods anyway. They don't have snow crab or massive iron mines. That's Newfoundland and Labrador's advantage, and free market economics says we need to focus more on what we do best. Okay, so moving on from theory to practice, the provinces have agreed to look at what regulations they can scrap to encourage more buying and selling across provincial borders, but that doesn't mean they're all going out the window. Fang suggests we might end up with several different trade agreements with various provinces. So, for example, we could end up with a seafood processing plant agreement with Nova Scotia. Collaboration, not competition. But it's still early days. We don't yet have predictive models like this. And Fang says something like this would take months of research to complete, math that just can't keep up with all of the executive orders flying out of the White House. So the provinces are taking small steps. They've agreed to figure out what barriers they can remove by June 1st. Most recently, everyone except Newfoundland and Labrador has agreed to direct-to-consumer alcohol sales. That doesn't mean provinces will be scrapping their liquor boards or changing their tax structures. It simply means you can order a case of your favorite stout while you're living in Montreal.
In fact, the provinces have actually been taking small steps to open up interprovincial trade for a long time. Their most recent major move, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, was signed back in 2017.
So this isn't a new conversation, it just has renewed urgency. If US tariffs come into effect before we found new markets for all our stuff, it could mean massive job losses. In oil and the fishery, 1 in 2 jobs could disappear.
Our latest storm continues to track northward into Wednesday. Strong winds continue for the island with some flurries in the west and snow and blowing snow for the coast of Labrador. Your full forecast details are coming up in a few minutes.
Didn't kind of register at first. Tammy, my wife, was looking at the email and she was freaking out. And I was kind of looking and I was like, is that the thing that we were going for? It kind of registered and yeah, and we're all pretty thrilled about it.
Well, St. John's Film has landed one local actor a nomination for this year's Canadian Screen Awards. Sean Dalton brought the character of Billy Skinner to life in gritty black and white film Skeet, which will be coming to theaters later this month. Well, as we've been talking about, additional U.S. tariffs are set to come into effect tomorrow, a day President Donald Trump is calling Liberation Day. Premier Andrew Furey spoke with CNN's Wolf Blitzer about the tariffs and how Canadians are reacting to the trade war. Here's part of that conversation.
He pretends that Canada is going to be the 51st state of the United States. He used to call Prime Minister Trudeau governor, 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 not premier or prime minister. It's really very, very insulting to Canada indeed. How are Canadians reacting on a personal level to these kinds of comments?
So it's incredibly hurtful. I can speak personally, as a father and who married an American. For me, this is actually very personal. I did some of my surgical training in Baltimore, Maryland. My daughter was born in Baltimore. She's a natural citizen. She could be President of the United States someday. Obviously I'm married an American. I have all my children are dual citizens, so it's confusing and hurtful for me as an individual, but Canadians at large are incredibly offended. There is a moment of national unity and pride in the country of Canada that I have not seen in my entire life. And I do think that we are worried about the rhetoric from the President of the United States. But make no mistake, the sovereignty of our independent, proud nation will never be jeopardized. What's confusing, Wolf, is that the relationship has been so strong. I mean, here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we welcomed 10,000 stranded passengers during 9/11. We've fought side by side in 2 world wars in Korea and Afghanistan, and would continue to kind of grow that relationship because it's built on shared values of democracy, of freedom, of independence, and of justice. And to see that being eroded is very troublesome to Canadians.
Well, in other news, many residents on the Avalon Peninsula have been enjoying the first signs of spring, but recent mild temperatures could have some unwelcome effects on local plants. The CBC's Jenna Head reports.
Spring in Newfoundland, we joke that it doesn't exist, but here at Lester's Farm and here at Botanical Garden, plants are blooming ahead of schedule.
A quick look around the garden already shows signs of spring, weeks ahead of schedule.
Even here in the woodland garden, we haven't done a cleanup, we haven't been down here at all, and we already have things blooming. Here we have snowdrops, and over here we have a cyclamen, this pink flower. So this was a type of cyclamen that we weren't even sure would come through the winter, and we had it protected with the boughs there behind it, and we had to take the protections off because it was flowering. So it's been flowering for a couple weeks now.
At Lester's Farm, an early spring is exciting.
So we're in our garlic field. We're starting to see the garlic starting to grow. It's a couple of inches high already. It certainly is a little bit ahead of schedule. For us as farmers, it kind of puts a little bit more of a half-year step.
Not great for all they grow, though. Lester is keeping an eye on his strawberry fields, and he's now watching his rhubarb, which is already peeking out of the ground.
There's some of the maintenance that we have to do with the rhubarb that requires it to be dormant, but I guess that's already gone by for us. Who knows, maybe we'll have some early rhubarb this year.
But like Newfoundland and Labrador's weather, early blooming plants can be unpredictable to deal with.
If we have a late spring, you can easily plan for that because there are clear boundaries, right? The weather is telling you what you can't do. But when you have an early spring, it's really hard to pick and choose what you're going to do.
For now, Lester and McCarthy say wait until May to tend to your own garden because what blooms now may not necessarily stick around. Jenna Head, CBC News, St. John's.
And these nominees are a perfect example of the passion and the dedication, innovation, and care that it takes to be a music teacher. And all 5 are right here tonight in the lounge. Music teachers play a crucial role in shaping our kids' futures.
And Robert Colburn.
Well, St. John's teacher Robert Colburn did not end up winning a Juno Award Sunday night. He was nominated for Music Counts Teacher of the Year, but he did accomplish another one of his goals. The teacher from Holy Heart of Mary High School had expressed how much he wanted to meet his idol, Juno host Michael Bublé, and that became reality on Sunday.
Hi, it's Arlette Lazarenko with The Signal. There's a lot of talk about the federal election, but what are you not hearing? What are some issues that matter to you that you want us to cover as we head to the polls? You can email us at thesignal@cbc.ca.
Time for a look at your full weather forecast. Ryan Snodden in for Ashley again this evening. Always great to be here. And let's get started because there is a lot to talk about. This storm system continuing to track northward, destined for the Labrador Sea, where it's really going to be a powerful storm for the Wednesday time period, especially along that coast of Labrador. Those winds are really going to start cranking up. Strong winds for the island as well. Southerlies for today, but it is going to be the westerlies that kick in on the other side of this system, and that's going to impact the island for Wednesday. We're looking at high pressure moving in behind that, but only for a short time as we are looking at this next system that's going to be tracking in, and that one looking set to bring more snow than anything else. But this one, of course, a messy mix. The rainfall warnings continue along the south coast of the island. You can see wind warnings in effect for Canada Bay area on the east side of the Northern Peninsula, freezing rain warnings into the Strait, and we are looking at the snowfall warning, blowing snow advisory, and then the blizzard warning for the coast of Labrador. And this is where we're looking at some very heavy snow, 20 to 30 centimeters, plus the strong winds. And let's time those winds out with the hour by hour. You can see the Avalon, the Burin, and into the Bonavista Peninsula this evening, and then into the Wednesday time frame, it's going to be the westerly winds across the island, most notably for the west and southwest, Port aux Basques gusting upwards of 70 to 80 kilometers per hour Wednesday morning. And note on the back side of this low, the winds are really going to start to rifle in here from Nain down through Makkovik. That's where we're looking at our best chances of seeing those gusts over 100 kilometers per hour, as much as 120 to 130. Makkovik down to Rigolette. Those winds are really going to be cranking on Wednesday. You can see the Burin Peninsula into some very strong winds as well. Twillingate, those coastal gusts will be 70 to 80 kilometers per hour. Widespread 60 to 70 kilometer per hour gusts on Wednesday afternoon across the island. And there are those winds, which again will really continue to howl, plus the blowing snow on the along the coast of Labrador on Wednesday. And you can see those totals really adding up. Looks like a widespread 15 to 30 centimeters, but we could see higher terrain areas exceeding 30 centimeters, as you can see here, amounts dropping off towards the west. And note the snow along the west coast. 2 to 5 centimeters possible for most. The long-range mountains could pick up 5 to, say, 10 centimeters of snow. The forecast for tonight, we're going to be seeing temperatures mild, 3 degrees for the Avalon Peninsula. Temperatures are really going to be cold in the west, a minus 20 in Labrador City. So let's time it out for you, and you can see the rain, the wind clearing as we move into the overnight, and by Wednesday morning it's a quieter day for the Avalon, the Northeast, at least in terms of the skies. But again, the winds are going to be a big story for Wednesday. With those westerly winds, the onshore flurries, and the risk of a squall or two firing up there along the west coast for Wednesday. And of course, the headline for Wednesday is that coast of Labrador, where the snow and blowing snow really cranking throughout the day. Some relief into the late stages of Wednesday, and more so Wednesday night into Thursday, we'll start to see some relief there. So we'll see the sun, the cloud, but again, those winds, the big story for the eastern and central parts of the island. The onshore flurries for the west. Labrador City quiet but cool as this area of high pressure settles in. That'll keep us quiet throughout most of Thursday. Some late day snow approaching the southwest. Corner Brook down through Stephenville, Port aux Basques to Burgeo. That's going to be our best chances of seeing some light accumulation. Quiet day for the east on Thursday, and Labrador quieter as well. This is the next system. High pressure to the north means this is going to be driving mainly to the south, but we'll see some light accumulation as we move throughout the day on Friday across the island. A little too early for totals, but it looks like we could see 2 to 5 in the north, 5 to 10 across the south, but we'll keep you posted on that. Still a bit of uncertainty. We'll see some lingering flurries into Saturday in the east. with a clear out for central and for western areas Saturday into Sunday, which is looking pretty quiet at this point, which will be nice, into the eastern parts of Labrador. And again, stormy Wednesday, but some relief after that. Sunday also looking quiet in through eastern Labrador. And yeah, a few flurries on Friday, but overall pretty quiet in the west as well. That's your forecast to now. Carolyn, back to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Well, since the first curling rock curved around the first guard, there have been questions about the strange physics that give the game its name. What exactly does a curling rock curl instead of sliding in a straight line? A Memorial University physicist and curler is here with an answer, and you won't need to know math or curling to understand it.
So curling has been a sport for more than a century, but actually the mystery, the physical mystery of how the rocks actually curl, that's been an open question that has interested scientists for more than 100 years.
Hi, I'm the physics fella, and today we're going to learn how a curling rock curls.
So the way curling works essentially is that they slide the rocks along the ice, and then the key thing is that they put spin on the rock, and that causes the rock to both slide down the ice sheet, but also to rotate laterally at the same time. And it's that rotation of the rock that actually gives curling this very interesting physics, and that allows people to essentially throw curveballs, where rather than sliding the rock directly down the sheet, you're able to bend the rock's trajectory around what are called guards, so other rocks that people put into place essentially as obstacles. There really are three key physical principles involved that allow a curling rock to actually curl. And so those three are the rotation of the rock, so rotation is number one. Number two is actually frictional forces, so the fact that the rock is actually rubbing and then there's friction between the ice surface and the bottom of the rock. And then the third one has to do with the relative velocity of the rotation of the rock compared to the actual stationary ice. When a curling player releases the curling rock, it slides down the ice, and it's doing two things. It's sliding linearly down the ice surface, and then it's also rotating. And the rotation leads to curl because of the physics of friction. The frictional forces always oppose motion. This is actually exactly how a car works. If you think about a car tire, friction actually pushes the car forward. So a car doesn't work without friction, and neither does a curling rock. So our third piece of physics is the relative velocity between the rotating rock and the stationary ice sheet. If you watch curling, what you often see is that a really, really heavy weight shot, meaning you throw it fast, there's a lot less friction, a lot less curl. In general, rocks that are thrown heavier have less frictional interaction with the ice surface, and then you need that friction to generate that drift, and so in general, the heavier you throw a shot, the straighter it's going to go. So one of the great things about curling that makes it such a complex sport is that you're actually able to influence the trajectory of the rock after it's left the athlete's hand, and this is done via sweeping. And this actually allows us to modify the trajectory of the rock by, there's a couple of different theories. One is that by rubbing the rock, you're changing the friction, you're changing the temperature of the ice. And another idea is that you actually carve these little abrasions into the ice that actually guide the rock almost in a physical way, like setting up a little wall that tends to guide the rotation of the rock and help it to curl. Another huge piece of physics is, of course, the collisions between rocks. And so when you have curling rocks colliding, there's momentum transfer, but then there's also transfer of what's called angular momentum. And the spin of one rock is communicated to the other rocks after they collide. You could write 100 physics theses on that, and people have, and will continue to do so. But so that's for another episode.
Well, St. John's filmmaker Nick Sexton's latest work, Skeet, is receiving critical acclaim. And last week, the film received even more accolades when former musician turned actor Sean Dalton was nominated for a Canadian Screen Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role. Dalton spoke with the CBC's Chrissy Holmes.
About what?
About the way he and his friends treat others.
We actually got it from director Nick Sexton. He sent it in, and he was over the moon, and didn't kind of register at first. Tammy, my wife, was looking at the email, and she was freaking out. And I was kind of looking at it, and I was like, "Is that the thing that we were kind of we were going for?" And it kind of registered, and yeah, and we're all pretty thrilled about it. I mean, totally unexpected.
You know, to be nominated for Best Lead Performance in a Feature Film as a relatively new actor, I mean, what does that mean to you?
I guess it shows that we were doing something right. I mean, Nick and I have been yelling and screaming and fighting and trying to get this thing done for years, So maybe some of the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into it is finally coming out.
This journey has been long in the making. I mean, how did Skeet begin originally?
Well, it was Nick's idea. I guess he saw something in me that he thought I could kind of pull this off. So we started yakking about it. We started writing stuff down and throwing ideas back and forth. This was right around the time that I was quitting the band, and I was kind of interested in something new. And we shot a bunch of stuff that actually did end up in the movie, but it was, this was 8 years prior to the movie being filmed. So we shot a whole bunch of stuff, and we kind of created this character, but there was no real story. And then we kind of got away from the whole thing. I mean, personally, it's something I can get into later, but it kind of went down my own very strange, dark path. And then, the COVID hit and it got even darker, and this whole movie kind of vaporized. My wife came into my life magically, and then Nick came in sometime later, and we all got together and put our heads together, and Nick had a great script written, and we pulled it off.
Hey!
Well, it's kind of a redemption story. This guy, Billy Skinner, is, I think somebody made a really good point. He's like a refugee within himself. He's a guy that's kind of stuck in a life that he can't get out of, and stuck in drug habits that he can't get out of, and stuck in violence and this kind of circle, the snake eating its tail, so to speak. And he's not a great guy, but we love him, nonetheless, and we're kind of rooting for the guy because, Nick and I grew up with people like this guy that we kind of knew and loved, and they kind of had no shot from the get-go, and they were heroes of ours. We love these guys. These guys were kind of, these were legends in St. John's, and so that's who we were kind of trying to portray. It's really a love letter to these kind of tough, crazy legend guys that we grew up with.
And what is that person like in your mind? Because it's likely we all know a Billy too, right?
We all know Billy. Well, just like, I mean, we kind of looked up to them. We were terrified of them. I mean, you didn't want to walk down Lime Street and get your head punched off by one of them. But, but at the same time, like, if they had your back, I mean, they were the most loyal, beautiful people. And it's heartbreaking because they didn't have a chance. Right from the get-go, they didn't have a chance. And, Nick and I both talked about this all of the time, how we felt for these guys and we love these guys, And so Billy's kind of a hero, because it is a story about hope and redemption. I didn't think it was going to get here. I thought like I always, even in my lowest points in life, I always had something that I looked forward to. Even if I had to make it up in my head, there's some kind of artistic project. Maybe someday I'll write a book, or maybe someday I'll, write more music, or maybe someday we'll do some theater acting. So I always had a carrot, 100%. I have one right now. There's always a carrot dangling in front of me, but I didn't know that other people were going to recognize it.
Well, to national news now, the White House has confirmed that Donald Trump will unveil his global tariff policy tomorrow. That's expected to happen around 5:30 Newfoundland time. The country's trading partners, including Canada, will be watching closely, but the U.S. president is also facing political pushback over how his trade war could affect inflation. Richard Madden reports.
The White House is previewing what they're calling Liberation Day on Wednesday, when President Donald Trump will announce sweeping reciprocal tariffs on all U.S. trading partners, including Canada. Now, administration officials say the amounts of tariffs on each country are being finalized, but will be based on what tariffs foreign nations put on American imports. The White House is also dismissing growing concerns that Trump's aggressive tariff policy could worsen inflation, tank markets, and sink the economy. They insist it's all part of their strategy to bring industries and jobs back to the U.S.
They're not going to be wrong. It is going to work. And the president has a brilliant team of advisors who have been studying these issues for decades. And we are focused on restoring the golden age of America.
Trump is also pressuring his own Republican senators to not support a resolution to lift the 25% blanket tariffs on Canada. Senate Democrats are calling to end the national emergency declaration on the northern border over fentanyl that Trump used to justify his tariffs.
We're here to stop a huge national sales tax being imposed on Americans through these Canadian tariffs that are based on a fake Canadian emergency.
Some Republicans representing border or farm states are worried Trump's tariffs would damage their integrated economies, and they've signaled they'll join the minority Democrats in this symbolic vote on the Senate floor.
We're asking for 4 Republican senators to actually go on record what they've all said privately. They're aghast at the tariffs.
And while it's highly unlikely this resolution will pass both chambers of Congress, any support from Republicans would be viewed as a political warning shot from Trump's own party against the president's expanded tariff and global trade war. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
And still on this topic, the company in Quebec that makes the jerseys for the NHL says Donald Trump's tariffs could spell an end for making them in Canada. For the last 50 years, the authentic pro jerseys have been handmade in that province. CBC's Douglas Gallivan has that story.
For hockey fans, wearing a jersey to support your team for the big game is a time-honored ritual. But how Canadian is your Montreal Canadiens jersey? Well, it turns out quite a bit of it is, at least for now.
These jerseys are made here in Quebec in St. Hyacinthe, and they have been for 50 years.
Mike Quinn is the VP of Sales for SP Apparel. Every NHL jersey that's hit the ice since 1975 has come from them. Unlike the replica jerseys, which come from overseas, he showed us how the game jerseys are made.
It's not like a mass production line.
The yarn is imported from the USA. It's then spun into fabric on site. The fabric is then split and finished in a multi-million-dollar machine. Some designs require sublamination, basically a mega printer. Then everything is cut. A typical NHL jersey is around 100 separate pieces that are all stitched together by hand. The logos come pre-made from China. They are pressed into place, then secured by a worker with stitches. The last step is quality control before packing and shipping.
From beginning to end, right? It's being made here. We're very proud of that.
But being made in Canada comes with a price.
The labor is the big component because you're paying Canadian dollars, you're paying Canadian labor rates.
An authentic pro Canadiens jersey on NHL Shop, run by the American company Fanatics, which holds the contract to all NHL merchandising, starts at $499 plus tax. If you want to add a player's name and number onto the jersey, it's almost $600 plus tax. What's more, with 25 of the NHL's 32 teams based in the U.S., nearly 80% of everything made for the league in St. Hyacinthe could be hit with tariffs.
A 25% increase in the cost of a jersey to a Fanatics. That's a big number, right? On top of everything they're paying to play, to have their brand in the NHL. So could that mean that they look down the line to find alternative solutions? They probably will.
Trump all along said, we want those jobs to come back to the U.S. like they were in the 1970s and 1980s. And this is one of those things that's easily mobile.
We are vulnerable because the price has a certain elastic. Yeah. And how long you can stretch the elastic before it clashes in your face. We don't have the capacity to absorb that 25%, and the customer doesn't have the capacity to absorb that 25% increase.
CEO Steve Berard worries about what potentially losing the NHL contract would mean for his 250 employees.
We have a very good relation with the NHL. They really appreciate the product. They really appreciate the fact that it's made in Canada. It totally makes sense. But there's always the elastic that we're talking about.
If they relocate to the US, and there is this wave of patriotism right now, do you decide then that you're going to boycott your Habs jersey, your Oilers jersey? I don't know that this is the type of thing that's going to really make the NHL pause beyond just it's a business decision.
In the end, the NHL doesn't have the final say on where the jerseys are produced. Its partner, Fanatics, does. SP Apparel says that the company hasn't given it any indication yet that it plans to make a change. Fanatics did not respond to our request for comment. Douglas Gellivan, CBC News, Montreal.
Well, in other news, a volcanic eruption south of Iceland's capital Reykjavik is triggering evacuations near the small fishing town of Grindavik.
It's close to town, but it's a more calm eruption than the previous few we've seen. The problem is a part of the fracture actually opened up inside the barriers protecting the town.
While the current eruption appears small, there is a danger of lava flowing into the town. Some areas were evacuated after geologists warned that the eruption was imminent. The North Atlantic island nation has seen multiple eruptions in recent years. With its glaciers and volcanoes, the island is also known as the land of ice and fire. Experts say the so-called fissure eruptions could keep occurring for decades or even centuries.
So here's what we've gathered from talking to local residents.
I spoke with a renter who's facing eviction this fall.
It is not for the weak of stomachs.
What does it mean for you to be able to give that advice and to know that you've helped? Don't look down.
If this is something that you didn't know about, let me tell you.
Heather Gillis, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
St. John's.
Corner Brook.
Shaji, Inuk First Nation.
Grand Falls, Windsor.
New West Valley, Newfoundland and Labrador. Well, with the federal election campaign well underway and politicians out on the trail, CBC Radio's The Signal hosted a panel with local parents to hear what they want to see from Canada's future leader and what they want the country to look like for their children. Here's part of that conversation.
There are a lot of things that we want available in Canada, for ourselves, our children, services. We need to make sure that whoever is elected is willing to attract the investment needed to fund those services that our citizens deserve and also not stifle innovation. A lot of these conversations often happen in silos and they're corralled around, certain positions. I think it's important that we discuss what our expectations are for our kids' futures. And I know, I want every generation to be better off than the next generation.
Pam?
I'll go back to fact versus fake. I don't want to see American-style politics. I don't want to see bashing another leader. I just want to see what you're standing up for and be someone that we can be proud of as a country.
Luke?
I mean, are we going to be better off? Are our kids going to be better off than we were? I'm not sure that's entirely clear. I see the cost of living crisis, housing crisis. I see tuition rates rising. I see a pullback from, good paying jobs with pensions. I mean, I think this question is still up in the air. And this is an important election to think about those things.
I'm thinking about the fact that I'm the one who gets to cast the ballot this time. So I think as I go in there and I'm voting for about those who get to contribute to our country, our province, and our municipalities who won't be able to cast a ballot. So whoever I vote, I make sure it's not just my thoughts and feelings that go into it, but knowing that there will be people who will be impacted who might not be able to have their voices heard.
All right, one final look at your forecast for tonight. Let's pick up where we left off with this storm that's rolling through tonight and Wednesday, still feeling the impacts of the winds on the island, the snow and blowing snow. The headline with this one across Labrador, particularly along the coast of Labrador, where those blizzard warnings are in effect, blowing snow advisory, snowfall warnings. And we're going to be watching that rain taper off here across the island through this evening. Now, by the time we get to Wednesday morning, it's the winds that are, again, the big story. Widespread gusts in the morning, 40 to 50 kilometers per hour, with some gusts 60 to 70 along the coast. Into the afternoon, a more widespread 60 to 70 gust. With coastal gusts in the 70 to 80 kilometer per hour range. Canada Bay area gusting to 90 kilometers per hour, so the wind warning there. And again, the coast of Labrador, those winds really rifling in. You can see here, gusts possibly exceeding 120 kilometers per hour. Makovic, Postville, down towards the Rigolette area. That's going to be where the wind is really howling in there throughout the day on Wednesday, plus the snow. So just blizzard conditions, obviously, in those types of winds with the snow coupled with that. Now, the winds easing Wednesday evening, and even along the coast of Labrador, some relief, but really not until Thursday, as this low is going to be working its way up into the Labrador Sea. This is when it's really cranking on Wednesday. There's the snow and the blowing snow throughout the day. Note the flurries along the west coast of the island for Wednesday. The east will see some breaks of sun, which is great. Wednesday evening, we're going to be seeing that kind of continue to curl off into the eastern parts or the central parts of the North Atlantic. Note, as we look at that snowfall outlook, this is where the bullseye is going to be. kind of a widespread 20 to 30 centimeters along that coast of Labrador in those areas under the blizzard warning. We are looking at some light accumulation through Wednesday along the west coast, enough to create a dusting, and we'll see some lingering flurries along the west coast even on Thursday. Brighter skies towards central and eastern areas, and a pretty quiet day in Labrador, though a cold day as this area of high pressure sits overhead. The next system we're going to be keeping an eye on over the next few days will track in late Thursday evening into the overnight. This looking set to bring some light accumulation. Doesn't look like anything to write home about, with some lingering flurries also into the Friday timeframe. We'll pick up this story on the show tomorrow night. That is your forecast to now. Carolyn?
Thank you so much, Ryan. And Ryan will be filling in for Ashley again tomorrow night. Always so nice to see him on the show. Well, that's it for us. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Hope you can join us again tomorrow.